Welcome. It's good to have everyone. I hope your day's off to a good start. I know we're joining from all over the place, but here the weather is definitely really lovely and giving me lots and lots of energy in a way that's really nice. And I hope you all are feeling some of that too, in whatever way feels true for you. And yeah, kind of before and as we get kind of rolling, I see folks still trickling in, which is totally fine. Welcome, everyone. Want to just give a big thank you again to Canada Council for the Arts for making this possible and kind of their support of this workshop series and enabling us to do that. And I'm really happy to be collaborating with ACCA in the process of making that happen. And yeah, before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining from the traditional and stolen territory of the Ganahage and Mohawk, and a place that served as a gathering site among people for a very long time. And I know that we're joining from all over the place across Turtle Island, and want to just take a moment to recognize the historical oppression of the lands and the cultures and the original people on the land that we're living on. And kind of in alignment with, the theme of what we're looking at, I often like sharing resources and pathways for continued learning in these veins and paste it in the chat box. You can see it, a link to a site and also just in their like about us blurb, kind of about what they're doing. And it's an organization, Indigenous AI, and looking at and research program kind of imagining how to conceptualize and design AI based on Indigenous knowledge systems and kind of what that looks like and the grounding in just all of these pieces. And so I think that that's really neat and just something interesting for us to continue learning about and exploring and knowing about. So I just want to kind of poke that and encourage you to click the link and have it on your browser for later to kind of look at and just, learn about these things happening. And yeah, we're going to dive in today. I know folks still may kind of trickle in, but today's going to be a little different than some of the other days where I've done a whole lot of kind of talking, and we'll do some more interaction today and also kind of engagement and exploration together. And the first thing that I want to do with this to kind of get I hear some seed ground back feedback background. Oh, I said feed ground. Nope. So I just muted everyone. If someone was trying to unmute on purpose, feel free to do that and ask the question, but I wasn't sure. But the first thing I want to do is I'm going to open up a whiteboard just here in Zoom. And I've made this continuum, and I invite you to draw a line on this continuum aligned with whatever your truth is in terms of whiteboards. And so if, for example, you're very comfortable, you would put a line over here. If you're not at all comfortable, you'd put a line over here. And I'll walk you through, if you haven't done this on Zoom before, how to access the drawing ability. And if you haven't done this before, you should see if you're on a computer kind of like centered-ish likely, or maybe to the right, like options or view options, maybe the three dots. Yeah, some of you are finding it. And if you click that, you should see a little like window open if you select the annotate selection. And I took off the names so people won't be able to see whose names are making what marks. But if you find those dots, options, view options, click annotate, it should open up a little board area and give you the kind of, you can select the pen to draw. And if you're on a handheld device, an iPad, an iPhone, whatever, there usually is like just a little pin sign over kind of to the side somewhere, and you'll click that. Cool. Yeah, a mix. Awesome. Yeah, and if anyone's not finding success on how to make marks, feel free to unmute and ask or chat in the type box. We'll make sure you can find that. Cool. So quite a spread. Awesome. Next thing, I'm curious about this as well for you all. If you want to write, like, what are the whiteboards that you have used or are using? Because there's kind of some different like categories and types of whiteboards that exist, which we'll talk more about. And I'm curious to just see that from you all as well. Like, what have you used? What are you using? And you can either draw names with that pin marker, or some of you, it all depends on your device on that bar, may see a text box where you can find um, text as well. Either one is a great option. Cool. Zoom, Miro. Mhm. Awesome. Zoom. Yeah, no worries if things overlap because the Zoom delay is there. Yeah, and the check marks next to that. Beautiful. Zoom whiteboard. Amazing. Cool. And I see that I think it's NIL. I might be not reading it correctly. Um, yeah, so lots of folks who've used Zoom, Mentimeter. Yeah, totally. A little bit of Miro. Awesome. Love those cursive O's. Yes. Beautiful. Okay, awesome. Um, cool. So yeah, getting a sense of yeah, just where folks are, what folks have used. And in kind of a one more thing we'll do that's a little more kind of goofy. We're going to have if you are on team cats, you're over here. And if you're a dog person, uh, make a mark of some kind on whichever side feels appropriate. Or if neither do, figure out what that means for you and how you might make that mark. Yeah, the infinity symbol crossing both sides. Go cats. Check mark, hearts, dogs. Yes. Meow. Beautiful. Yes. Awesome. I love it. Rabbits. Yeah. Very valid. Yeah. I like all animals too. Amazing. Cool. Awesome. So yeah, I'll come out of the share for a moment. And that's super useful information for, oh, I didn't successfully close it. I just cleared instead. Press the wrong button. Um, I like today we're going to be looking at like, okay, what are some options that are available, but also looking at and thinking about how are we interacting with the things that we're using and what are potentially ways to be interacting creatively with things that we maybe are using by default. And so we'll look and talk more about that in a moment. And I want to do one other thing kind of as we're starting this that's tangential to whiteboards, but kind of hits on this topic. That's just kind of a fun thing, an energy creation thing. And what we're going to do for this is if you have access to video, that'll be a part of this, is that we'll be turning on and off our video at different intervals, which I'll explain more in a moment. And you will turn on your video and move for a moment or strike a pose of some kind, and then your video will go back off and repeating that. Do folks know how to turn on their video? If so, feel free to turn it on. Give me a wave. Beautiful. Seeing some folks. Amazing. Excellent. Cool. Awesome. Great. So, what's going to happen is that I'll play a song in a moment. And this isn't kind of the normal dance party that you're thinking of. But when the music is there, we'll do this at whatever interval feels right to you. You'll turn on your video, either, just say hello for a minute, dance, show something, whatever. And then you'll turn off your video at whatever interval feels good to you. And if being just audience, that's okay also. But we'll do this kind of blinking on and off the screen at the times that feel right to you. Does that logistically make sense to folks? Give me an indication if not. Yeah? Okay, amazing. Um, I find that this looks even cooler if you hide the non-video participants on Zoom, which you can do depending on what system you're on. If you're on a computer, often the same. Yeah, great question, Lynn. Often if you're on the computer, kind of in the top right corner, you'll see view. And I do recommend being on gallery view for this and selecting the hide non-video participants. So you'll only see the folks that are on the video just because it makes it look more neat. So that's what I would recommend for view. But you do you and what feels right. Any other questions on the logisticsy side of things? One of the things, as I mentioned earlier, that we want to look at is how are we using the things that we are using? And when I think about whiteboards, I would say I think about kind of two main-ish categories, which of course has some overlap and breakdown. Um, One of them would be whiteboards that we're using live in the moment, often as a part of a training, for example, like this, where we open a Zoom whiteboard, right? And we're just in this moment using that is there. And then otherwise, there are the whiteboards like Miro, et cetera, where there may be things that are happening in them potentially more complexly than the Zoom whiteboard. Okay. And it sounds like some of you are using different ones at different times. But I like to think about like within the whiteboard of Zoom, not only can we draw something or do something when we're together, but what are the ways that we can utilize that function there to create rating scales, to collect lists, et cetera, to take votes, to gather information in varying ways. Yeah. Um, any questions, thoughts, reflections on that? I'm curious how folks are using whiteboards now in Zoom and if you're using it. It seems like a handful of folks were. Yeah, I don't know where it is, the whiteboard. Cool. Yeah. So the whiteboard, you probably can't see it now since you're not a host, but usually on the bottom where like participants chat, share screen, etc., is when you click share screen, there's a whiteboard option there, and I can show you a visual image of that in just a little bit as well. Yeah, cool. Awesome. So I want to look at kind of in this idea of how are we using these different tools is I'm going to share a link. Oh yeah, here. Let me see the sticky note option from Miro. Zoom unfortunately doesn't have the sticky note option on their whiteboard, which is kind of a bummer because I really hear that. Yeah, and Miro for group online activities where we're working together. Definitely Miro can be used in that way as well, for sure. Ooh, Linwa. I haven't even used Linwa before. Totally. So I'm gonna have to make a note of that and look it up. Yeah. How can you capture the whiteboard? Lynn, do you mean like how do you save the image that's created? Is that what you're asking? I want to make sure I answer that correctly. And feel free to unmute if that's easier. Okay. So generally on Zoom, when you use the whiteboard on my Zoom, I have my account set up in your settings to like automatically save any images that are created. So I don't actually have to manually do it at all. Like when the meeting closes, it just all of those things are saved in my documents folder. Like there's a folder that Zoom kind of designates as the like saving place. Depending on what kind of computer you're on, that location might vary some. I'm on a Mac. And so for me, it's like in documents, and Zoom made its own folder that says Zoom. And then it kind of divides everything by the individual meeting. And if I recorded something, it's there. My whiteboards are there. So potentially, depending on your settings, it may automatically be saving. And if that isn't the case for you, or you just want to be sure, there's usually on the bar of like where you have like the text option and the draw option and the stamp, there's a save option that looks like that, kind of on the far right side. And if you click that, it will save that document likely to that same folder. So wherever that folder is for you, that is generally where it's going to save that image to. Yeah. So I hope that, let me know if that doesn't answer the question. Um, cool. Yeah, so feel free to ask that. I want to look at we're going to kind of bounce between some different ones today just to explore them and also to talk about different ways to use them. And what's going to happen next is we're going to look at Jamboard, which is an option that can be used in all kinds of different settings. I like to use it in meeting settings, training settings where there is collective kind of collaboration happening. But one of the things that I like doing about it that I think is kind of interesting and different, and I'll share my screen here, is if this is the Jamboard that we're using, we can all access this same board in small group settings and add on to it, which I'll note more about, but it does have the sticky note option. So if you want to add a sticky note on the screen, you can select the sticky note option and click it. And then there these things are, and you can move them around yourself or also draw, etc., as you wish. And what's going to happen is I'm going to share a link for Jamboard in the chat box now, and you'll open this link on your device. And while we're all together on the first page of this Jamboard, I want you to just make sure you know how to access the basic settings and functions in Jamboard so that you can make the sticky note. Okay. So I've shared the link in the chat box. And if you click that link, it should open up Jamboard on your end. And Jamboard is a function of Google. If you have other Google accounts, if you have a Drive or a Gmail or a Gcal or whatever, it's one of the things that is kind of in that suite. It doesn't cost any extra. It's just there and available. And if you're in that room, just add a sticky note, add something onto this Jamboard to make sure you know how to use it. And if you have questions about that, let me know. And then I'll give us a secondary assignment in a moment that'll happen on the other pages. But for now, just making sure that you're here, can access it, can make a mark, can use it to start out. Okay. Are folks seeing? Oh, it's protected, so you can't do anything. I had the settings set so that it wouldn't be that anyone who's in it could. Let me make a change. Okay, you should be able to now. I shifted that. And today is really uh, the lesson the lesson I didn't think I was teaching was how you can plan everything and things still don't always go the way that you think they will, and that you have to make the adjustments and adaptations on the fly. So thank you all for being with me through that. And I'm, glad to be also normalizing that reality that you can do trainings all the time and still have this experience. Yeah, cool. I'm seeing folks add in. And yeah, if you make a sticky note and you can always move it by kind of grabbing it, clicking it somewhere else. Beautiful. And if folks are having, oh, that's interesting. Can't get access to Jamboard. That's interesting. So I don't think it requires actual like Google login. Like you should be able to access it entirely without logging in. Because it's set that anyone with the link can edit it. I wonder if you open it, the folks who are having more of a blockage, if you open it in an incognito window, if it might enable you to access it. See if that works. I'm doing the same to see if it'll open for me. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, you switched accounts. So need to restart it. Can't type anything, says view only. Oh, interesting. Different folks having access. Yeah, maybe open it a second time. Same for me. It's like it took a minute to load, but now I can on the incognito window. I opened it in another one. So perhaps refresh it. Yeah, and you get a sticky note. If you look over to the left side, there's like looks kind of like a little square piece of paper with a kind of looks like a little sticky note under the cursor. And if you click that, it should pop up where you can type it. And I'm seeing more folks joining in. That's so interesting, Jewel. Folks having the view only. Maybe refresh your screen. It sounds like that's working for some folks to open it or open it a second time. Like if you maybe re-click, let me give you maybe re-click. I pasted the link in the chat box again here. So see if that will work. And if not, worst case, what we're going to do with this next is I'm going to put you all into breakout rooms with a couple of other folks. And what's going to happen is you'll see at the top of the Jamboard screen, and if you don't see it, that's okay. We'll be in groups in a moment. You'll see like kind of the 1-4. And if you click that, it will get you to the next page. And on Zoom, I'm going to share my screen so you can see this through Zoom if you want me to see it or want to look at it. But if you look kind of up at the top of the screen, if you click through these slides, you can essentially see different pages that I pre-made with questions. And what's going to happen is that I'm going to put you all into breakout rooms with small groups, and you'll talk about these topics that are here, the suggestions. And as a group, as you're talking about them as the group, you'll be adding things onto this shared page. So you will see things that other groups are also adding to the board. Okay, so if for whatever reason your device is not allowing Jamboard or it's not working, very likely you'll have someone in your room who is having success, and it's okay if only one of you is writing. And so you'll work through these different prompts together in a couple of minutes so that we can hit lots of different things. But you'll go to page 2, answer questions, reflections there, go to page 3, etc. Any questions about this? Let me know if you got them, or otherwise I'm going to open the breakout rooms. Beautiful. I'm going to open the rooms, press call host if you need me. Ooh, awesome. Yeah. So looking at, and we'll kind of review this a little bit and then talk through it. So it's when I look at the things that we noted, kind of seeing the pieces of what is really hard about tech, the toggling different systems, time to keep up with everything, filing system, changes to documentation, making sure you have ownership, accessibility, remembering how to operate everything, using tools differently, also other people all using them differently, etc. Totally. Yes, very much this. Um, yeah, and I realized this question was not the most clear at how I asked it, but my thought process was thinking about the ways that sometimes we have to know ourselves when to outsource to other people, and these ideas of kind of identifying what are the things that other people are outsourcing to us, and like that there are all of these kind of mixed and different competencies that we all have, and just kind of beginning to think about some of those elements and working through those pieces. And so it's neat to see kind of what gets outsourced to you all and what that looks like. And a lot of these things I'll note too are kind of beginnings of conversations rather than, a full summation of here's the conclusion of everything, but just the beginning of exploration. And then similarly, it's nice. I know not everyone got here as much time as they wanted to, because folks were sort of trickling between them. But it's neat to see these pieces. And I'm curious for you all, and feel free to type or unmute and say the process of, being in Zoom kind of at the beginning, using the whiteboards those ways. You may have used it like that before, maybe not. What that was like, also using whiteboards, the Jamboards this way, what that process was like. Just curious for kind of thoughts and reflections, both about the usage, how you might use it, how you are using it, what it felt like to use this way. Yeah, curious for thoughts and feedbacks, and I'll keep talking a little bit about some of my own thoughts on this as well. But I really like thinking about what is the thing that I'm wanting to have happen? And is there a way to use the tools that I'm using to facilitate or to make that happen? Right. So something like I want to get a sense of where people are in terms of their own knowledge on this topic. Okay, well, maybe we can make that continuum, right? We can make voting columns and ask people to put their information there. I can ask for people to add words or drawings or pictures or things that represent what they do or don't know, right? And so ways to gather that information that can both elicit engagement, but that also can just be an interesting way to visually consider information. And I really like that about whiteboards in general. Same kind of Jamboard One of the things that I really like about that structure and model is that it can create a different type of collaborative space in terms of having sort of simultaneously like small group conversation and discussion like in a smaller room, while also still kind of having this like plug into the collective via that whiteboard where you're seeing other people's information also be shared there, and the ways that it's like you can have these smaller group conversations but also still be getting information from other groups, and maybe have the moments of like, oh, that's interesting, yeah, we do that too, and now we're talking about that as well. And so I really like that feature of kind of Jamboard specifically, and how that can work in a live setting and what that can yield and lead to. So that's kind of an interesting thing to think through there. Um, yeah, and I'm just checking these. Yeah, whiteboards, group online. Yeah, priority sharing totally via voting. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Any other thoughts, reflections in the process of, yeah, brainstorming, but not always for what comes deeper. Yeah, and it really depends, and I think it but I think definitely there's very different ways to kinda implement and integrate these things. And we're going to look at Miro next, actually, a little bit that people often use for brainstorming, but sometimes do also take it kind of to those next layers and levels, and are using it in ways that kind of before I learned about these pieces was not even really on my mind, but that I like because I do tend to be really visual. Um, but there definitely, I agree that it's like there are certain things that it does or doesn't work for, kind of depending on what the circumstances are, very much so. Yeah, and Jamboard for simplicity, for sure, definitely. Cool. Yeah, awesome. Feel free to keep writing reflections. I know some of you said that you've used Miro before, and what I want to do is also I have the Miro account where you all should be able to just join a link that I have and be in it, even if you don't have Miro or log in. So fingers crossed that everything works like it's supposed to. That is how the link is set up. Um, the first thing that we're going to do in there is also just kind of familiarize with the format a little bit and do something kind of fun, and then we'll look a little bit more at like what are the other ways people are using this outside of just that brainstorming window. What does that look like? How's it happening? And so in a moment, I'm going to share this link with you to this page that I'm on that you can see here. And I invite you, you're welcome to, you don't have to make a little character for yourself if you feel inclined. And you'll see here on the screen that it's Command D to duplicate something, whatever, it'll vary depending on what device you're on. But if, for example, I want one of the color palettes down here, I could just take that, but then it won't be there for anyone else to copy. But if I Command D, it will make an extra one that then I can slide up here. And similarly, I can design my little person copying these different accessories. And so I'm going to just give you all the link, and we're all going to stay into this main room together. And I'm going to be popping back and forth between, but also want to just give you all a moment to kind of explore this in a very low key setting. And then we'll look at some other ways that people are using this in kind of more complex fashions beyond the brainstorming. But want to just give you a moment to kind of be in there a little bit and be exploring. And so you could feel free to click that link. Let me know if you're having any issues accessing that. I'm seeing lots of names in there, which is great. And feel free to just, yeah, make your little person or click around and draw outside of that, whatever feels right to you. And if things get tight, I'm going to delete the fake, the sample people that were already in here, so we have all the space that we need. Yeah. And I do like as well, if you have your Miro account, like you can probably tell, the people that actually don't see any names on it. You see visiting designer connected to the names, which can be nice for anonymity. And same for Jamboard. That can be an interesting way, because when people are joining, they're joining as, like the anonymous duck, miscellaneous turtle, whatever Google gives them as names. It can be an interesting way to share information that way. Where am I supposed to be? Just you. Oh, okay. So, Lynn, do you see the? Let me know if you got it. But if you click the link in the that I paste again in the chat box right now, it should open on your browser the Miro board. And if it doesn't jump over there immediately, then you may have to click over to whatever your internet browser is because it's probably open in the background behind Zoom. Um, oh, you can only see a little bit at a time. Do you see this may or may not work depending on the device that you're on, but usually in the right bottom corner, there's like a zoom in, zoom out button that's like plus or minus kind of 33%. I mean, mine says 33 right now, but it says whatever it is. You may be able to zoom in or out um, to make it not quite as big on your screen. Yeah, and on an iPad, totally, Lynn. Yeah, switching between things on a portable device is definitely trickier where you can't, yeah, toggle quite in the same way that you can on a computer for sure. Yeah, I see some really great people coming to be. Yeah, and I'm kind of toggling back and forth between Zoom and Miro myself too to keep an eye on questions. But if I don't respond immediately, it's probably because I'm on the Miro screen, but I will be back. Yeah, and we'll just take a moment to kind of play in this a little bit. And I'll talk about this. You can have Miro yourself unpaid. And there are limitations to it though. Like you can only have a small number of Miro boards, which is what kind of it's a page. It's like the whiteboard that we have. Um, and so, there's limitations, but depending on what you're wanting to do, or if you're just curious about, oh, yeah, how are people using this? Or would I find this useful to use? You can make a free account and have a couple of different boards and go through the different things that they have available to sort of look at. Is this something I want in these other areas? So you're able to explore and look at it. And then there's varying different paid kind of levels and accounts depending. There's some that let you have, like this one, visiting folks unlimited amount without them having to log in. There's some where other folks do have to log in, but it's, you know, that process, like there's all sorts of different um things. I'm I'm loving that the sweet mustache, Kayla. It's great. Yeah. I mean, you do you. I'm a big fan. I love it. Yeah. And this is also something where it's like, these things can also just be fun for this kind of thing, of having the moment of like, oh yeah, making our little avatar person and figuring out what matches us the closest, right? Like not everybody's perfectly represented in this. I don't know if I could find my hair really, but pieces there. I see lots of people coming together. Oh, nice eye patch, Penny. Excellent. Loving it. Mhm. Amazing. Yeah, and if you've made yours, feel free. Yeah, you can scroll up and down. One of the things that's often really interesting about the mural boards is that they're often quite gigantic overall. And so if you zoom out, like if you're in that kind of bottom right corner where there's the zoom in, zoom out, like if I zoom out right now, the area where all of you are and that kind of board area is so tiny compared to the overall surface of the board. And so do feel free to zoom out and go find another little corner to just fiddle with the other settings. And we'll go to some other pages in a moment and look at some other pieces of this, but feel free to explore and jump around and look at just what are the different settings here and how do they work and what's available. I get that. Yeah, some of the comments of, yeah, the different pieces. So I'm gonna go through these. Yeah, how do you make a name box, like name a character card? So a couple of options. One thing that you can do is, and this is gonna maybe vary depending on what kind of device that you're on. If you're on a computer, on my screen, if I look all the way over to the left side of the screen, there's kind of a toolbar and I see like an arrow and then I see a little like box thing underneath that. And then I see T for text. And if I click that T, it will give me a text cursor. And then I can go click that cursor wherever I want that text to be and then write my name in. And you can also, if you've written text already and you want to change it, you can also go in and like change the font and the type on that as well. Yeah, let me go back to the questions. Let me know if that doesn't work. Yeah, and I totally get that on the iPad. It's different, and I think that that speaks to uh, this reality of like this, obviously, we're kind of exploring and looking at things. But I think this piece of how are we choosing the tools that we're using and based on who's using them and how they're using them, does this tool actually work for us? Right. And if we have folks that potentially are working from an iPad or a portable device more often than not, then perhaps this isn't the thing that would work best, right? Or you'd want to look at, okay, what is this going to look like? How's this going to go? How's it going to function? Right. And yeah, and I definitely get this piece of like tinkering in the tool being frustrating. I find for me, I like the idea of so many different tools and also get really overwhelmed in trying to make sense of how do I use this and how do I just make it do the thing that I want and finding that balance between trying things while also um, like figuring out what's going to fit and work best. So I really, really hear that. Yeah. And I'll give folks a moment more to kind of wrap up their person or whatever they're in the middle of doing. And then I'm going to pop into share screen where we can kind of look at some of the other things that people are doing in Miro with the last couple of minutes that we have. And I know, and I'll note this too, like we've done a lot more kind of interactive and exploratory things today than we've done in some of the other trainings. And, we're always looking for that balance of like, how do we do these pieces? How do we also think about how we're using the tools that we're using? So even if you don't use whiteboards or never will, still thinking about what are the tools that you are using and are there creative ways to use those maybe to accomplish the things that you want to have happen that you may not be doing, etc. And yeah, kind of thinking through the varying pieces and knowing that this is very much kind of an exploratory initial looking at things rather than kind of answering every question that we may have. And what I'm going to do is, and is kind of a neat factor of this as well, is I'm going to I've got my share screen, my Zoom screen shared on Zoom. There we go. And, but you may also keep open the board that you're drawing on if you're drawing on something. And even though I'm clicking outside of this page, you can still continue to do that on your own device. And so feel free to continue whatever you're doing, whatever feels right for you. But I'm going to kind of talk about some other things that I'm showing on the screen as I move through it. So I want to just kind of hit some of these the last few minutes. And so also if you are feeling, done with your character or just want to watch along, just make sure that you're in the Zoom window of things, because that's where you will see the things that I'm sharing my screen to. And I know that it can get a little tricky sometimes when you have both things open to figure out like, where am I and what's happening? Um, One of the things that is, you can see that I'm in on the main Zoom window, my like Miro kind of main page. And one of the things that's really kind of interesting and unique about Miro and some of the other whiteboards that kind of function more similarly to this is that they have a lot of templates that have been pre-created that you can use just as they are or build off of depending on what you're wanting to do. So for example, if I go in here to show these templates, right? Like I can see okay, there's these different templates that people are using for workflow, for making roadmaps of products, for, digital campaign planning, for calendaring, um, like all sorts of different things that I'm just going to kind of scroll through here so that you can sort of see these different options available. And so I think this is where whiteboarding can move outside of potentially, not always. Some of these things are also brainstorming tools, but outside of just brainstorming into application. And it's naturally going to depend on how this is being used and who's using it because certain things may in theory be great but still not work for you or your team depending on what it is and what kind of work you're doing and what that looks like. Um, but I'm just kind of going to continue scrolling through these because there's lots and lots of them and I want you to just sort of see what's available. And I think this is a really interesting thing in terms of especially like understanding and learning about what is out there, not only in terms of like what's on Miro, but also thinking about even if you're like, I'm like doing this brainstorming thing or trying to organize myself for these things in this kind of way. And maybe you're feeling like it's not really working exactly right or like feeling great. That going into this for me is really interesting to be like, oh, okay, people are like doing this for that. That's interesting. Does that work for me or is that interesting to me? Yeah. Kayla, I saw your hand virtual raised. I saw the pop up of that. Mhm. That's a good question. There may be some that are not, but I know a lot of them are. So that's a really good question. Yeah. Yeah, but I actually think that a lot of them are available on the free tier because I'm thinking about when I just had, the free version, and there were still many of them. So it's possible that not everyone is, but I definitely know at least a handful of them are for sure, and maybe all of them. Yeah. You can only have like I think it's 3, maybe it's 4 boards on the free version, I think. So it's like I think you might have access to all the things, but you can only have a much smaller number of them. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, but I find it scrolling through these for me is an interesting thing of like, oh yeah, what else is happening? Even if I'm not going to use all of these um, features, like what's available, and you can sort of search it by just scrolling down or looking at like, okay, yeah, meetings and workshops, agile work flows, of getting in here and making it more specific, and you can much like in uh, Teams and Slack and everywhere else that you can like at someone or highlight something to someone or assign something to someone, you actually can do that on Miro as well, assuming that your team is like all using it. So it's if you are, for example, like designing out how's this project going to launch and what's going to happen, you can assign things to teammates the same way that you would on other types of tracking things. And I just opened one to default and I'm going to click over to the question marks. Um, oh, cool. So yeah, Victoria noted paid version of Miro is not that expensive and really worth it for you. I'd love to know, Victoria, if you're open to writing in the chat box or unmuting, like what are the different things that you most commonly use it for? Just because it's nice, I think, to hear. Um, yeah, and then your question, do you need to go through Zoom to bring everyone together so you can talk as well as whiteboard? So oh, like, you mean if we weren't on a Zoom meeting, could we all be in Miro, like, auditorily talking together? I think that's what you're asking. If that's not what you're asking, um, let me know. Yeah, good question. So on all of these, as far as I know, um, some other something is needed for the auditory connection. That could be, a conference phone call rather than a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting or a Google Meets or whatever in the background. But as far as I know, on the platforms I'm familiar with, they don't have the like live audio um like function, like live that kind of meeting function. Like you can all be in the document, of course, doing whatnot and communicating that way. But um yes, as far as I know, there needs to be an external something that is doing that. And depending on if you or your organization or whatever organization you're working with, there may also be plugins that kind of more easily link the two. So, for example, if you're using um, something that does kind of create the meetings, you can more easily like link like when we're in this meeting, this is the Miro board that opens up, or when you're in the Miro, this is the Zoom that opens up kind of thing, to create that ease. But yes, as far as I know, external source for audio. Good question. Um, and yes, Kathleen, delete old whiteboards. Totally. I'm thinking you're talking about in Miro, but maybe other things as well. And yes, in Miro, you can definitely delete a board that you don't need. So depending on what you're using it for, you could, fiddle around with it, make your 3 boards, delete something you don't want or need, look at other options, etc. Um, Cool. And I see Victoria noted, thanks for these thoughts. Yeah, Miro for strategic planning, group work, decision making, community consultations, lost the templates, so I don't have to create my own. Learned good tools via templates, also awesome. And easy to export data in Excel and PDF. Totally. Yeah, and all of these, I didn't show that on Jamboard, but you can also, on all of these, there's kind of fairly easy ways to like get the PDF of whatever has been done and explored. And so this can also be a really nice way if you are kind of like Victoria noted, working with a group or kind of community consultations, can have a visual representation of like, oh yeah, what are we talking about? What are these distinct areas? And okay, now we're going over into this quadrant, and people are being invited to put in the things that they see here, and then that you can export that in PDF form that kind of captures lots of things together, can be a nice sort of like concrete takeaway without actually more effort from you, because you all already created that along the way. Um, yeah. Yeah. And I know that we're at the time marker for today, but I appreciate all of you being here and kind of jumping in and diving into these different tools. And you will still be able as well. I think you should just be able to keep using, if you want to just fiddle around in Miro. Also, you won't be able to have access to everything without an account, but you feel free to fiddle in that link that you already had access to through me, and I can repaste that again. Like you can get in there and just mess with settings and things. Like you won't be able to like go make your own separate different board, but certainly you can toy around and explore in there a little bit. So yeah, thank you all for joining, and hope to see you again next 2 weeks.